In an ever-evolving world of digital photography, we often find ourselves captivated by the essence of vintage gear. In this video, I want to show you a lens from the past and help you understand how old lenses that you still may have can be used even today to capture beautiful photos using the Nikon D7000. Hey guys, welcome back to another episode on Chris's World. I'm Chris, and today I'm going to be talking about old AIS lenses or old film lenses that are Nikon and why they are so great to use on your newer Nikon DSLR. This is a 1980s lens and it works fantastically with this Nikon D7000. I'm going to go over all the details on why I think it's like a great combination even in today's era of photography. You guys hear that frog behind me? I think he wants to be part of the show as well. I don't know. But you know what? It makes it pretty cool to hear that. But yeah, so AIS lens with a Nikon D7000 body. Let's get into it. I want to show you all the details, get into the nitty-gritty of everything, and help you understand why these lenses are so great to even use today in this digital era of photography. Okay guys, so let's talk about lens compatibility. There's a little bit of history on old film lenses, and I want to talk about that first because I feel it's really important that you guys understand why some of these film lenses won't actually work with your newer Nikon DSLR. And that's because in the early film days of Nikon, so say what was the year range? It was basically from 1959 to 1957, Nikon made an F mount, that is the Nikon F mount, the original Nikon F mount, that was basically incompatible with our newer cameras today. And I'll show you a visual right here of why. The cameras that they made actually had a little pin that would connect with these little rabbit ears. Now, some people call them little forks or whatever, but basically the pin would go right in this slot right here. And you guys can see it. And then what would happen is the pin would then turn with this aperture ring, okay? So that's basically the lenses work just like this, but they had a different mount that wasn't this specific mount. Okay, so let's talk about this a little bit because I feel it's important. When you see this mount, it does have the same 3 slots that you would need. But the problem is that it doesn't have the aperture slot for the new cameras. And that is basically right here on this. There's a little tab that they basically cut out in the lens, which you will see right here on this lens, where this ring, when you turn your aperture ring, this will actually catch on the newer DSLRs and some film cameras and turn your aperture accordingly instead of using those rabbit ears. So what Nikon did is later on, when they created their new F mount, so you can use the old non-AI lenses, they made a conversion ring that you can put on to those lenses. It was basically an adapter that was made specifically for all their different lenses, and what they did is they sold it separately. So you can use your old non-AI lenses and convert them to AI lenses so then you can use them on your AI Nikon cameras. Basically, it was just a new way of using the aperture ring and being able to have the camera understand what's happening. So I don't own one of those older film cameras like an FM model or an EM model or any of those to really be able to show you how that works. But that's what this is. This little, sorry, my light just turned off. This ring right here basically is the AIS version, but it's very similar. Now, on the AIS version, they put a little dip right here. Okay, let me see if I can get that to focus so you can see it. That little notch right there is what they put on. I'll go ahead and show you basically right now what that is on the camera so you guys can see. That is what AIS is. And it's still even used today on newer Nikon lenses and everything like that. It basically just holds in the lens so it won't move around. A lot of the lenses nowadays don't have an aperture ring. And it's funny because Nikon actually made a lot of the newer cameras, so say like the Nikon D7000, the Nikon D300S. These aren't newer now, but they were back in, you know, the early years of DSLRs with an aperture ring, and I think they still do, even though then like the D800, the D4, a lot of newer cameras that are higher end came with this aperture ring that spins. Let me show you that. Now there's one thing that I need to note is that there were some Nikon cameras that actually made it so you can bend this little tab backwards so you could use non-AI lenses on your camera. And basically what happens is, you see this little notch right here? Where is it? Right here, this little notch on the back side of the lens. Let me take off this cap so you can see a little bit better. This notch, this little groove right here, catches on. So when you put your lens on, when you spin the aperture ring, this will turn with the camera, okay? Or with the aperture ring built onto the camera frame. And what that does is it allows you to go ahead and pick what aperture you want, and your camera identifies that. Now, in your camera, you actually have to program it into a small little menu setting called non-CPU lens. And so basically you're just telling your camera, hey, I have this lens and I have a lens that goes to this certain aperture. Okay, and I'll go ahead and show you that a little bit later in this video. So stay tuned for that because it's really important that you guys learn how to do that. It's very simple, but still you need to know how to do it so then you guys can do it yourself if you have any of these old AIS lenses. Now, AI lenses and AIS lenses are compatible with your newer Nikon DSLRs, but they are not compatible with a Nikon D80, D90, D60, all your lower end mid-tier, kind of mid-tier cameras. I'll show you what the difference is because I have two different kinds to show you. The D80, I'll show you the D80 and the D7000 basically, what the difference is and what you should be looking for and to see if your camera is compatible. Well, basically, that makes all the difference. So if you don't have the feature that I'm talking about, your old lenses won't be able to use the 3D matrix metering in the camera, okay? Or it's just, not matrix, 3D metering mode, okay? So then it won't be able to determine light. So it won't be able to use the light meter in your camera. So, and that's really important because what happens then is if you want to use one of these lenses, you'll actually have to buy a separate light meter, do it the really old-fashioned way, and you will basically have to kind of do the math yourself in a way, which can be difficult in this kind of circumstance. So, you know, if you don't have, say, a Nikon D7000 or even a Nikon D200, because D200s have the feature as well, then you can't really use these lenses too well. But if you do, oh gosh, it is so much fun to use, and they really will give you a big surprise. These lenses, they're pretty nice for their age, especially if you find a good one without haze or any kind of dust or any kind of like anything in them, because they are old. They can, you know, have their things. But if you do find a good lens, these will really give you some amazing images. And I'll go ahead and show you some visuals of pictures, some samples of what I was able to capture with this 35 to 105 micro lens. Really cool stuff. Now, there is, of course, one important thing that I forgot to mention, is that if your camera does have this tab, do not attempt to put on a non-AI lens, because what will happen is if you do, you can end up breaking this little tab, and you know, any pins that might not have been there on a non-AI camera, and you will break your camera essentially. And that's not something you want to do, because it will definitely make it hard for your camera to ever work the same again. So I do not recommend it. Do not try it, because yeah, that's not a good thing. But any AI or AIS lens is definitely compatible with newer Nikon DSLRs. So another thing to note is that when you are using an AI or an AIS lens, you can only use it in manual or in A mode, because you're basically using the camera in aperture priority, and it's all going to be a manual experience. You can't really use the shutter priority. It doesn't really work, because the camera cannot change the aperture by itself, nor can you use P mode, which basically changes everything. It just won't work. So A or M are your only options, okay? Because you're basically turning your aperture ring manually, and making it so you can basically control your image a little more, and you're taking that extra little bit of time to take your photo, which is, in retrospect, a really cool way to take pictures anyway, because you're getting more in touch with the way photography used to be with film, okay? Kind of something to think about. I think it's pretty cool. As you can see, the Nikon D7000 does very well with this kind of lens, and it really makes it look like it's a cinch to use. Really, all you're doing is focusing and taking a little bit more time in each and every photo, which really, that's what photography is all about anyway, making sure you get the perfect shot. No, it's not to say that this process is always easy.
Adjusting the camera can be quite tedious, and making sure focus is precise is quite another measure. But you know, the whole experience about this whole thing is just getting it right and making sure that it works. Just manual focus is a different monster indeed. It makes it so it's just different. But I feel it gets you in the mode to take better pictures, to make sure that you are precisely getting into the method of what photography really is.
So the one thing about this lens is that it's manual focus, and when you use it, you have to make sure you have the little green dot inside lit up, because there's a little arrow. There's two arrow indicators that show where your actual subject is focused. You can still use your selection focus points to guide you and where you want to use the manual focus. But when you do it, just make sure you have a green dot that shows that your subject is actually sharp and it's going to be focused. The other thing about this lens that I really love is that it gives you the ability to change your aperture on the lens. It feels more like an analog kind of experience, more so than a digital, which is so nice. The other thing is that these lenses, you can actually get these lenses for a really good price these days, and they're very sharp, considering that this lens was probably, I think it said it was like about $800 and something back in the day when it was first being sold, and I got it for like, I don't know, a lot less than that, like $30, $40. So you can't beat that. And you still are using Nikon glass, which is definitely a plus when you're doing when you're using old film lenses. Not to say that other film lenses aren't good, but you know, Nikon was always the most expensive lens system back then as well. So you're winning in that way too. You know, I just want to, you know, when you're doing this lens does not have autofocus, it doesn't have VR, it doesn't have anything. So the one good thing about these lenses is that they will never wear out unless they get fungus or excessive dust or anything like that. But other than that, these lenses will never die. It has no computer chips in them. They don't have any any mechanisms that's gonna, you know, that'll make the lens fail in any way, unless it's like a type of focus ring failure. But it's very, I would say that unless you're really throwing this lens around and dropping it and like that, you won't probably have a problem with that. Now, when we get into the menu system of this camera to show you how this thing works, you'll see that you just set up the aperture. So I just do what the minimum aperture is. So that'd be f22. How do I have it? I go in the menu. I'll show you basically how it is when we get back home, and I can go ahead and just set the camera up and show you everything in the menu system. But it actually works very well, because when you are using this, it's letting you use the matrix metering system. Not matrix metering, but not the 3D, but the color matrix system that the camera uses to meter with, which is really nice because you're getting accurate information even still. See, the thing about Nikon cameras is that they actually work with their old lenses, which is so nice. Now, there are some body styles that do not work with old film lenses, and that will be like the D90, the D80, I think the D3300, anything like that, the D40, none of those. So basically any of the cameras that have the ability to have a non-CPU lens, you have to make sure your menu system says non-CPU lens. If it doesn't, then your camera won't work with this lens. You can't set it up to have the the aperture work. Everything will have to be manual. You'll have to probably get a meter, like an actual meter that's outside the camera to do it, and that's just a hassle. So your best option is get a Nikon D7000. This, I believe, was I think is the best option for this kind of thing, unless you go with a more expensive camera. This is going to be your cheapest option. Now you can use a Nikon D200, but it doesn't have live view, and I will show you why I think live view is so awesome on this camera with a film lens, because it just gives you all that extra goodness to make your camera function even more than you thought it ever could. So that's pretty cool. So let me go ahead and show you that right now. So when you go into live view, you'll see the image. I don't know if you guys can see that. My reflection's in the way. Oh, now my car is. Okay, let me go. I don't think you guys can see very well. Okay, there you go. I'll stand in the way of the reflection. Anyway, so you guys can see that there is an image there, right? So then when you're looking at live view, you have your f-stop right here, you have your shutter speed, and of course you have your metering mode right there. You have all your information as if you would with say a digital lens, okay, or an AF lens. So the nice thing about this, and this you cannot do this on a lens that basically has autofocus, and it's really surprising with the Nikon D7000. When you have a lens that is autofocus, you cannot change your shutter speed. Not shutter speed. You cannot change your aperture in your camera with live view mode on. Okay, so here's what I'm talking about right now. So I'm holding my bigger screen so I can see what's going on too. So if you see a phone in the way, that's what I'm doing. But basically, so I'm going to change it on the fly right now. As you can see, it gets brighter when I make the aperture larger. When I make the aperture smaller, f/22, so it gets darker. Now that doesn't happen when you have a lens that does not have the ability to change your f-stop, like autofocus. You could try it on live view. You cannot change your f-stop in camera with your live view on with a D7000. Now, as far as other cameras go, I'm not sure because I don't own any other camera that has a newer live view system. But this one in particular, you can change your f-stop because your lens is changing your f-stop, not your camera. That's the difference. So essentially, this makes it almost like a mirrorless camera in a way, and that's what I've heard from other people. Like, hey, this can turn your camera almost into a mirrorless camera, because what's happening is you actually have the ability to change things on the fly, and it's all manual. You know, not to say that that's a perfect example of a mirrorless camera, but it definitely helps. So you can change your f-stop, and everything is literally live. You know, you're not seeing anything different than what you're going to get a picture of. So that's what makes it very nice. So I want to go to 3.5, or I want to go, let's go to f8. I'm going to adjust my shutter speed according. Now the only downfall is it only goes to a 30th of a second. So keep that in mind when you're using live view. That's the only downfall of the Nikon D7000. I haven't gotten a workaround that. I don't think there is, but if there is a workaround that, you guys can let me know in the comments below. But as far as I know, you can't. So as you can see, when I adjust the shutter speed, you can actually get a pretty clear, you can actually get a pretty decent image. And you can adjust your shutter speed to match what picture you want. And it's live. It's all live. So when you take a picture, you know, that's what you're going to get, which is really cool. So it makes it... Let's just stop. Oh, it's, I think, under the dirt. How weird. Let me see if I can turn the camera to show you. It's like down here somewhere. Anyway, you can't hear it now. It stopped. But that's funny. Anyway, so that was to give you an example of how live view works, and if you got, I'll show you kind of a cleaner image in in at home. Okay. All right, so now we're going to go ahead and set up the camera so that we can use it with a non-CPU lens. And I'm going to go ahead and show you how to do that. The first thing you want to do is, of course, hit your menu button right here, and you're going to go find that you have all these different menus, of course. It's going to be in the wrench, and you're going to go ahead and see non-CPU lens data. So we don't have our lens attached yet, so let me go ahead and do that. Okay. So we're going to be using the Nikkor 35 to 105 lens, and this is going to be all manual. So the whole entire lens is a manual lens. There is no autofocus. There is not a CPU in the lens. It's just an AIS manual lens from the 1980s. Okay, so let me go ahead and show you. First, we're going to go ahead and attach this lens to the camera. And as you can see, you have the little F22 mark right here. Where is it? Right there. Okay, we're going to go ahead and line that up with our dot on our camera. We have a little white dot right here. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and do that. Okay, and as you can see, it does line up properly. So we'll go ahead and just turn it. Okay, and you'll hear a click when it's all clicked in. Okay, so now our lens is attached in the camera, and I'm going to go ahead and set up the menu so then the camera recognizes what kind of lens I'm using. And it's not going to be an automatic feature. This is basically all manual. I have to tell the camera what kind of lens it is and what aperture it has. So let's go into it. All right, so right now it shows that I don't have a lens on, so I'm going to go ahead and change that. I'm going to change my focal length. Now this focal length is basically any number that will help you recognize the lens. I'm just going to do 35 because that is the lowest setting, or the lowest focal length that this lens has. And that's okay because the camera, of course it's not going to say it in the metadata because the lens isn't going to, connect and be able to tell the camera stuff at all. But what's going to happen is the camera's going to be able to tell what aperture I'm using because of this. Let me take off the lens to show you this nice little ring right here. You see how this moves back and forth? That's exactly what's going to be able to tell how much aperture I have on available to me. Okay, so let's go ahead and put this back on. And as you can see, it moved with the lens because of this notch right here. That's really important. Okay, and that's what basically tells, that's the difference between the AI, the non-AI and the AI and AIS lenses. Okay, that notch right there, that little groove, that thing right there, that basically will move the aperture dial back and forth, so then I can, I'm able to tell the camera what it's doing manually. Okay, so then it can actually use the metering mode within the camera, and that's so important. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and set my maximum aperture. My maximum aperture of this lens is going to be 3.5. Okay, and we're going to go ahead and hit done. Okay, now the neat thing about this is that when you are using this, and I showed this a little bit in my video already, I believe, but if you didn't see it, I'm going to go ahead and show you again. We're going to go ahead into live view. Okay, and of course I have my f22 lens set to f22. Okay, I don't have anything in front of me, so let me go ahead and put something there so you guys can see. Okay, so there's my picture. Let me go ahead and get in focus. Now, the neat thing about this lens is it does have a micro mode. So all I have to do is just hit the button right here, and I just go ahead and turn my lens to micro mode, okay? So then I can actually adjust my focus accordingly, and there you see that it is now in focus, okay? Okay, so as you can see, we have our picture right here. I'm moving the camera a little bit too much, but it is in focus. Now you can't tell on live view because live view basically, you zoom out a little bit. Live view won't tell you if it's in focus or not, so you gotta have to guess the live view. But the nice thing about live view is it actually can zoom in to your image and get more and closer, and you can actually tell if the fine detail is in focus. That's one cool thing about live view. And what kind of makes it more of a mirrorless camera in a way, it is not a mirrorless camera, but it will give you the features of a mirrorless camera because every function that you do is actually live. And that's of course how live view works on most cameras these days. But back then, Nikon didn't really make it so autofocus lenses worked with your camera very well on the D7000 to where you can actually change your f-stop. So as you can see, f-stop, if you could see here, normally f-stop would change. I don't know if you guys see that. Okay, because I don't have an autofocus lens, it's not going to work. But normally autofocus won't, or not autofocus, but aperture, the aperture setting won't change with an autofocus lens. The beauty of having a manual lens is I can actually change the aperture now. So therefore, as you can see, everything gets darker or lighter, just like if it was a live view mirrorless camera. Okay. So that's a pretty neat function right now. So we're seeing digitally right now. I'm not looking through the optical viewfinder. This is all digital, okay? So that's pretty neat. And of course I could change my ISO, and that's also live as well. So everything is live. That's really the cool part of this. Now it doesn't say if it's in focus or not because you don't have autofocus. And there's no real indicator to help you understand if it's in focus unless you completely zoom in with your digital zoom, just like that, okay? So as you can see, it's not in focus, but you can actually fine-tune it when you have it like that, okay? So I hope you guys learned something from this small little tutorial of basically set up your camera for an AI/AIS lens. And just remember, non-AIS lenses, with those lenses, you have to have an adapter or else you will break off this little tab that I was talking about that's up here, okay? It's so important that you guys, understand that non-AIS lenses have a different mount, and it does need to be changed out because the aperture ring is completely different and it doesn't have this little notch cut out on non-AIS lenses. All right guys, well, that is the end of this video. If you liked this video and found this to be really informative and it helped you out in any way, please make sure you hit that like button. Please subscribe to my channel. Please share this video with anybody who you think might need to know this information, because I think it could be pretty valuable to anyone who might own some older Nikon lenses and even own the Nikon D7000 body, because this camera body is pretty awesome, especially when you pair it with a manual lens. You just get that, extra ounce of creativity that you didn't have with an autofocus lens. So, just make sure you like it, subscribe, And you know, I hope you all are doing well. Thank you for anybody who has subscribed to my channel already and become a great part of this cool community that we're building. And I hope you're all doing well. I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.
If you like this video, please hit that like button and subscribe to my channel to get notified when new videos get posted. Thank you for watching this video. Please consider checking out some of the other videos on the links at the end of this video.